it has to be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen because it's the three of us as we were at that point in 1958.
At 78 years old, Barry Gibb stands as the last surviving member of one of the greatest musical families in history. For decades, he carried not only the fame and fortune of being a Bee Gee, but also the heavy weight of personal tragedy, particularly the untimely loss of his youngest brother, Andy Gibb. Now, in his later years, Barry has begun to open up more honestly than ever before, revealing heartfelt truths about Andy's life, struggles, and legacy. His words offer a rare glimpse behind the dazzling lights of stardom into a family bound by music yet fractured by pain. Barry's reflections are not only about music, but also about brotherhood, resilience, and loss. For fans who grew up dancing to Bee Gees hits or for younger listeners discovering their timeless sound, Barry's voice is both a reminder of music's power and a testimony to family love that endures. Barry Allen Crompton. Gibb was born on September 1, 1946 in Douglas, the capital of the Isle of Man. From the beginning, music seemed stitched into his very being. Raised in a working-class household, Barry's parents, Hugh and Barbara Gibb, recognized that their children carried something extraordinary. The Gibb household was filled with the sound of singing and harmonizing, with Barry naturally stepping forward as the musical leader. His siblings, Robin and Morris, gravitated toward him, forming the early seeds of what would one day become the Bee Gees. When the family relocated to Manchester, England, and later to Redcliffe, Queensland, Australia, the boys' musical ambitions only grew stronger. Their early performances were small, local shows, clubs, and community events, but even in those humble beginnings there was a spark of greatness. Barry, in particular, was driven by a remarkable sense of creativity, scribbling lyrics and melodies that often outshone his young age. In Australia during the 1950s, the Gibbs first adopted the name Bee Gees, a nod both to their initials and to the catchy branding that stuck with them for life. By their teenage years, they had moved past being just a novelty act of singing brothers. They had become performers with undeniable talent. Barry's ability to guide the harmonies, lead with his distinctive voice, and compose original material set the group apart from other family bands of the era. While Robin carried a haunting vibrato and Maurice balanced the arrangements with precision, it was Barry who acted as the anchor, giving the Bee Gees their artistic direction. These formative years were not just about discovering music. They were about building a bond of trust, ambition, and brotherhood. The stage was already being set for a journey that would take them far beyond Australia and into the international spotlight. By the early 1960s, the Gibb brothers were ready for more than just local stardom. Their parents believed in their sons' potential, and in 1966 the family returned to England in hopes of securing a record deal. That move proved to be the turning point. Signed by producer Robert Stigwood, the Bee Gees quickly made their mark with a string of hits that showcased not only their unique harmonies, but also their remarkable songwriting abilities. Barry, at the helm, became recognized not just as a frontman, but as a prolific composer. The Bee Gees' early hits, including New York Mining Disaster 1941 and To Love Somebody, demonstrated a maturity and emotional depth that belied their youth. While the Beatles were dominating the charts, the Bee Gees carved out their own lane, offering songs filled with sincerity and soaring harmonies. By the late 1960s, the Bee Gees had cemented their place in popular music, with Barry's falsetto voice becoming a recognizable hallmark. Yet their journey was not without obstacles. At times, internal disagreements threatened the group's cohesion, but their shared vision for music always brought them back together. It was in the 1970s, however, that their rise turned into an explosion, relocating to Miami, Florida, and working with legendary producer R.F. Martin, they tapped into a new sound, soulful, rhythmic, and perfectly suited for the emerging disco movement. Barry's falsetto became the centerpiece of this transformation, giving the Bee Gees a new identity that resonated with audiences worldwide. As Saturday Night Fever catapulted them into superstardom, Barry emerged as both the group's leader and one of the most influential figures in music. The boy from the Isle of Man had gone from small stages in Australia to writing songs that defined a cultural era. Fame was no longer a distant dream. It was a global reality, and Barry was at its very center. The 1970s were a golden chapter, not only for the Bee Gees but for Barry Gibb in particular. With his falsetto soaring above intricate harmonies, the group created an unmistakable sound that became synonymous with the disco era. Their soundtrack for Saturday Night Fever in 1977 was nothing short of a phenomenon. Songs like Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love dominated charts around the world, transforming the Bee Gees into cultural icons. Barry's songwriting genius was at its peak. He had an uncanny ability to capture the spirit of the times, blending rhythm, melody, and emotion into music that spoke to millions. His songs were more than just hits. They were anthems of resilience, love, and celebration. Even those who were not fans of disco found it impossible to escape the magnetic pull of the Bee Gees' sound. What set Barry apart was not only his falsetto, but his leadership within the group. While Robin brought intensity and Morris contributed balance. Barry often acted as the creative director, guiding the group's musical direction. Beyond their own work, Barry also collaborated with other major artists, expanding his influence far beyond the Bee Gees. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack sold over 40 million copies worldwide, cementing its place as one of the best-selling albums in history. The Bee Gees swept the Grammy Awards, winning Album of the Year, and their music became inseparable from the disco movement. But while critics sometimes dismissed disco as a fad, Barry's artistry proved it was more than a passing trend. His melodies had staying power, and his ability to reinvent the group ensured their relevance long after disco's decline. By the end of the 1970s, Barry Gibb had achieved what few artists could claim, not only dominating the charts but shaping the cultural heartbeat of an entire era. For Barry, this period was a validation of all the years of hard work, family support, and personal dedication. The boy who once scribbled lyrics in notebooks was now responsible for some of the most recognizable songs in modern music history. His golden era was more than success. It was the creation of a legacy. While the Bee Gees are forever linked to disco, Barry Gibb's true genius lay in his versatility. His songwriting extended far beyond the pulsing rhythms of the dance floor, crossing into genres as diverse as pop, country, and adult contemporary. His collaborations read like a who's who of legendary artists. For Barbra Streisand, he co-wrote and produced the album Guilty, which yielded timeless classics like Woman in Love. With Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers, he crafted the unforgettable ballad Islands in the Stream, a song that remains a staple in both pop and country music. Diana Ross, Dionne Warwick, and countless others benefited from Barry's songwriting. Gift, each track bearing his unmistakable touch. Few songwriters in history can claim such an expansive reach. Barry's catalog includes over 1,000 songs, many of which became chart-topping hits across multiple decades. His ability to adapt to changing musical landscapes while retaining his own signature style is what made him extraordinary. Recognition naturally followed. Barry Gibb was inducted into both the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, affirming his place among the greatest artists of all time. But perhaps the truest testament to his legacy is the continued relevance of his work. New generations discover the Bee Gees through streaming platforms, movies, and television, keeping the group's music alive long after its original release. Barry's impact isn't measured just by awards or sales. It's measured by the way his songs have woven themselves into the fabric of people's lives. Weddings, dances, heartbreaks, and celebrations across decades have been accompanied by his melodies. His falsetto voice may be iconic, but his pen was equally powerful, shaping the soundtrack of entire generations. Barry Gibb's professional triumphs were paralleled by a deeply personal journey marked with both turbulence and lasting love. At just 19, he entered his first marriage with Maureen Bates on August 22, 1966. At the time, Barry was still in the early stages of his career, caught between the demands of building a music empire and the pressures of sudden adulthood. Though the couple appeared committed, their relationship was short-lived. They lived together for only a brief period, and by July 1970, their marriage had officially ended. This early union revealed the strain fame could place on young stars. Barry, juggling late-night recording sessions, touring, and the glare of the spotlight, found it impossible to balance the stability of home life with the chaos of stardom. Yet the end of this marriage was less a failure and more a lesson, a turning point that shaped Barry's approach to love and family. Later that same year, fate introduced him to Linda Gray during a taping of the BBC's Top of the Pops. Linda, a former Miss Edinburgh, brought grace, elegance, and her own share of glamour. For Barry, their meeting was serendipitous, and their connection was instant. On September 1st, 1970, Barry's 24th birthday, the couple married. What followed was a lifelong partnership that would weather every storm. Unlike his first marriage, Barry's union with Linda became a cornerstone of stability. Together, they raised 5 children: Stephen, Ashley, Travis, Michael, and Alexandra. Each child carried forward elements of their father's musical legacy, with Stephen pursuing a career as a guitarist and songwriter, often collaborating with rock and metal bands. Barry's role as a father and grandfather brought him immense pride, grounding him even amid the chaos of superstardom. Barry has often credited Linda with being his rock. Through fame's highs and devastating lows, she provided unwavering support, keeping the family together even when grief threatened to overwhelm them. Their bond remains one of the most enduring marriages in the entertainment industry, spanning more than 5 decades. In 2009, Barry and Linda officially became U.S. citizens while retaining their UK ties, a symbolic gesture of their dual heritage. Their love story, born on a television set, became one of music's most steadfast partnerships. 4. All his success, Barry Gibb's life has been shadowed by heartbreaking loss. Music bound the Gibb brothers together, but tragedy would eventually separate them. The death of his youngest brother, Andy Gibb, in 1988 was a devastating blow. Andy, blessed with charm and talent, had enjoyed his own chart-topping career, but struggled with substance abuse and personal demons. Barry has spoken candidly about the guilt he carried, wondering if he could have done more to save him. The losses did not stop there. Maurice, the band's quiet stabilizer, passed away in 2003 due to complications from surgery. A decade later, Robin, Barry's twin in creativity and harmony, also died after a long battle with illness. Suddenly, Barry found himself the last, surviving Gibb brother, a role that weighed heavily on his heart. In interviews, he has described the surreal pain of outliving his siblings. "I never expected to be here alone," he once said. The grief was more than personal. It was professional. The Bee Gees were not just a band. They were a family. Without his brothers, performing became bittersweet, every song a reminder of voices that once stood beside him. Yet Barry has refused to let sorrow silence him. He channels his grief into performance, keeping his brothers' memories alive on stage. Each concert is both a celebration of music and a tribute to the family he lost. His resilience in the face of tragedy has inspired fans around the world, proving that even the heaviest loss cannot extinguish a true artist's light. As Barry entered his later years, he continued to reinvent himself while honoring the past. He maintained homes in both the United States and the United Kingdom, staying connected to his roots while embracing the life he built in America. In 2014, Barry reflected on his unique friendships, including a close bond with Michael Jackson, who often visited the Gibb household. These relationships illustrated the respect he commanded among fellow icons. Even as decades passed, Barry never stopped performing. Tours in the 2000s and 2010s proved that his falsetto still captivated audiences. Fans, young and old, filled arenas, eager to relive the golden days of the Bee Gees or to experience them for the first time. His concerts became intergenerational gatherings, uniting parents who grew up in the disco era with children who had only discovered the Bee Gees through streaming platforms or films. Barry's resilience, grace, and ability to adapt ensured his relevance long after most of his peers had retired. His reflections on life often circle back to family, how deeply he misses his brothers, how grateful he is for his wife and children, and how music has always been his guiding light. Far from a man clinging to past glory, Barry has become a custodian of his family's legacy, determined to keep the Bee Gees alive in memory and melody. Barry Gibb's story is one of extraordinary highs and heartbreaking lows. From a young boy on the Isle of Man to the leader of one of history's most celebrated groups, his journey reflects not only talent but also resilience. Though he carries the sorrow of outliving his brothers, he continues to honor them through music, ensuring their legacy endures. With over 1,000 songs, countless awards, and an unmatched falsetto, Barry stands as a symbol of perseverance, artistry, and love. His music reminds us that while life fades, true art and true brotherhood live forever.